Hello! Here's our video about the Gulf War. Take it away, Will.
The Persian Gulf War, codenamed Operation Desert Storm, was a war that originated between the nation of Kuwait and the Iraq nation in the Middle East while involving the intervention of the United States. This war started as Iraq triggered signs of violence and aggression with their invasion and annexation of Kuwait. The United States government was originally concerned with Iraq's position of power in the Israeli regions and did not like the fact that Iraqi government seemed to stir a sense of violence between the two peaceful nations of Israel and Egypt. The U.S. also seemed to dislike Iraqi support of Arabian military groups, which ultimately led to the U.S. To include the country of Iraq on its developing list of state sponsors of terrorism. Iraq had also claimed that the land of Kuwait was rightfully theirs after gaining independence from the United Kingdom in 1932 due to a specific land agreement between the two nations. When verbal disagreement grew to a point of stalemate between the two nations, Iraq launched a bomb attack on August 2, 1990 on the nation of Kuwait, officially declaring war between the two. Seriously outnumbered, the royal family of Kuwait ultimately fled from their city, leaving Kuwait in total control to Saddam Hussein and the rest of Iraq. Hearing about this incident, President George Bush sends troops into Iraq and Kuwait with a no negotiations policy until Hussein and his troops fully withdrew from Kuwait. From there, war and fighting broke out for a period of time that lasted approximately 1 year. As far as motives go, Iraq clearly invaded Kuwait with a symbol of aggression. Hussein and his troops felt strongly about the land property of Kuwait and its OPEC value and clearly wanted to take it by force. Hussein reinvigorated that aggression with his first bombing on August 2, 1990 of Kuwait. This act is what initially triggered the first outbreak of violence between the two. Therefore, according to the just war theory, this act would clearly have been started for the wrong intentions and would be unjustifiable. The U.S., however, invaded with a symbol of trying to stop the aggression and leading to peace, which would make their motives seemingly justified. One major ulterior motive for starting this war is the economic terms and realizations that would come with the control of Kuwait. Kuwait was a prime spot for oil production, which Hussein and the Iraqi nation wanted to be in control of as well. Kuwait initially was overproducing their quota of oil by OPEC standards, leading to a lower price in oil around the Middle East and thereby causing Iraq to lose more and more revenue for their oil. With control of Kuwait's supply, Iraq could counteract the inflation and control supply and demand of oil within that region and trade as they pleased. The U.S. seemed to simply want to put an end to the outbreak once and for all. From the U.S.'s point of view, their entrance into the war was justified in the fact that they were there to correct the evil doings and aggressions of Saddam Hussein and the Iraqi nation. For Hussein and Iraq, their reason for bombing and invading is clearly not justified, as they were the ones to initially mess with the peaceful regions. Due to Hussein's greed and desire for more power and money, Iraq ultimately started this war with violent intentions and went by any means necessary in order to keep doing so. The overriding authority of who declared war started with Saddam Hussein, being the leader of the Iraqi government and nation at the time. He stopped at nothing to get what he wanted and was willing to use any means necessary to do so. From an American frontier, President Bush, backed by his Congress, deemed it necessary to invade Kuwait and Iraq due to Hussein's actions officially declaring war for the U.S. onto Iraq. On August 8th of 1990, Hussein had installed his cousin Ali Mased al-Majid as ruler of the Kuwait nation in light of the royal family fleeing their post. This is the official declaration of Iraqi control over Kuwait, so most believe this date to have officially started the war. From over in the U.S., President Bush deployed troops in Iraq on September 4th, 1990, officially declaring the United States' entrance into the Gulf War. Ultimately, this criterion was met as far as starting the war. President Bush and Saddam Hussein, the highest figures of power in their respective nations, declared war and fighting. While Saddam did it purely out of spite, anger, and greed, Bush did so for different motives, which was to save an international companion.
Among all of the participants in the Iraq, Kuwait, USA Gulf War, Iraqis suffered the greatest injustice because the Iraq government did choose to invade into Kuwait, but once Saddam Hussein took control of Kuwait, the tensions between Iraq and Kuwait civilians stopped, and there was no more bloodshed. But once the United States intervened into the conflict, then hundreds of thousands of people died, including innocent civilians in Iraq, which had nothing to do with the actual tension between Iraq and Kuwait. So the story begins, as Will said, with Iraq invading into Kuwait. Iraq had many different reasons for the invasion, and many of them stem from Kuwait drilling a hole into the ground into Iraq territory to get oil from Iraq. This bothered Saddam Hussein, and along with a bunch of other things, such as Saddam Hussein's fear of Egypt doing a conspiracy thing with Kuwait to destroy Iraq, which doesn't seem logical, but it was one of the fears which brought Saddam Hussein to invade into Kuwait. Anyways, the Iraqi people suffered the greatest injustice because when the United States did choose to intervene, they took many measures which had absolutely nothing to do with the goal of moving Iraqi armies out of Kuwait. In fact, the United States government told people to bomb, the United States government, initiated bombs on schools, business districts, hospitals, mosques, churches, shelters, residential areas, historical sites, private vehicles, civilians, and many other things inside Iraq, which had absolutely nothing to do with the tensions in Kuwait, which didn't really arise much afterwards because the Kuwait government sort of stopped once the Iraq government took control of Kuwait. So there's a lot of tension between the United States government and the Iraq government at this point, and much of it stems from how the United States wanted a permanent military presence in the Gulf to ensure that the oil resources and the geopolitical domination of the Arabian Peninsula was met. And this goal was actually accomplished. And it's sad because it was accomplished at the lives of many innocent Iraqis, which weren't part of the Iraqi military. They weren't part of trying to take over Kuwait, even though Kuwait took away part of Iraq's land. There's just a lot of confusion in this war, and none of it is justifiable. In fact, none of the sides ever made any attempts to negotiate with the side. The United States never offered to talk with Saddam Hussein and ask him to please leave Kuwait and offer a peaceful solution. The Iraqi government never talked with Kuwait and asked them to give them back their lands that Kuwait took during the Iran-Iraq war. There's just a lot of really sick, mean stealing and murder that goes on both sides, but the most deaths occur from the Iraqis as a result of the United States senselessly murdering innocent citizens, as I have said many times, which had nothing to do with the war. Now, for the last resort topic, this is a very simple answer because the United States never tried a peaceful solution. They went in, and the media made this really wonderful and exciting because they gave stories such as the incubator baby story, which inspired people to go because Iraqis were seen as people who were killing babies. And this didn't happen because the story that was told was actually told from someone who wasn't even in Kuwait during the invasion. So it's just ridiculous. And there's other conspiracy things. It's just all really ridiculous. Was there any other choice but war? Yes, as I've said, there could have been negotiations. There could have been multiple peace talks, phone calls. It's just pretty sad. And the criterion was not met, obviously. And over 100,000 Iraqi civilians, nearly 300,000 Iraqi civilians actually got injured. And many people in Iraq died from starvation as a result of U.S. bombings to water supplies and shelters. So, it's just a really sick war, as usual. And I say as usual because I don't think that there's just any good war at all. But that's how I feel, and I'm assuming that the Catholic Church also thinks that this is a non-just war on all sides of the equation, because there could have been negotiations and none were attempted, none were broadcasted. Everything was just really bloody. So here's Lewis with a different view than mine. Very different. I do not agree with him, but he has his views and I've got mine. And thank you for listening and have a good day.
Had the U.S. not fought in the Persian Gulf, oil reserves in Kuwait would have been taken over. This would have been a huge hit to the Kuwaitian economy and pulled them into a massive debt. This would also be bad because Kuwait wasn't a threat to Iraq. Iraq invaded an innocent country. But if the U.S. had kept out of the Gulf, then it would have shown to other nations that it's okay to invade other countries simply because they want to expand their borders and they want oil. The odds of Saddam's army winning were slim to none after the U.S. intervened, because the U.S. was so technologically advanced. Had the U.S. not intervened, Kuwait would have been an easy target, because they are so small, their nation would stand no chance to the massive Iraqi army. The criterion was met here because the U.S. was helping defend an innocent nation from a foreign invader. An example of good that was achieved was justice was served. An innocent nation was saved from not only a massive invasion, but also a great hit to their economy. Innocent Kuwaitis were hurt and killed when Iraq overran the country. However, I know that people died and no one can put a price on human life, but when put in perspective, a country's economy was saved. If Iraq had taken over the oil reserves, then not only would Kuwait's economy have taken a huge hit, but also the world's economy would have been greatly affected. Not only that, but had the U.S. not intervened, it would have made a statement that a nation with selfish means could do whatever they wanted. That a nation could invade innocent countries and face no negative consequences. Even the church would agree that justice must be served. In this case, yes, the good outweighs the bad on this one. Here, the criterion was met. The war was an act of the U.S. defending an innocent ally in need of aid. This was an act of self-defense. This is a just war. Although the object was war itself, the intention was to defend an ally from a foreign invader. Congress declared war because they saw the U.S.'s ally, Kuwait, was being invaded. The Iraqis violently invaded Kuwait, so when the U.S. bombed the heck out of them, who's to say that they didn't have it coming? The point is that war was an act of self-defense and is a just war.
Blah.